Growing up, I always felt like something was off between my sister and me. It wasn't just the usual sibling rivalry you read about in books or see on TV. It was deeper, more complicated, and no one could quite put a finger on it. I was 16 at the time and my sister Sarah was 14. Despite us being so close in age, it felt like we were from completely different worlds. But the thing is, we didn't even really know why we didn't get along. It wasn't until much later that I realized the truth. Our brother Matt had been the one pulling the strings all along. Matt was 3 years older than me, and the golden child of the family. Everyone adored him, our parents, our teachers, even our friends. He was always charming, always so good at everything. In fact, I could never quite live up to his level of perfection. He was the one our parents always spoke about with such pride. His grades, his sports achievements, his so-called natural leadership. He was everything anyone could want in a child. Meanwhile, Sarah and I were just us. She was the quiet one, the one who always seemed to keep to herself, and I was more of a troublemaker, though not the kind of troublemaker you'd think. I wasn't rebellious or anything, but I always asked too many questions, tried to look a little deeper into things than I was supposed to. And that, I think, was the root of the problem. While I spent years trying to figure out why Sarah and I clashed, Matt just seemed to glide by, playing the role of the mediator, the perfect big brother. Our family dynamic had always been that way. He was the glue, keeping everything together while Sarah and I simmered in the background. But the more I paid attention, the more I began to notice strange things. It wasn't just the fact that Matt could do no wrong. It was the way he manipulated situations. How, somehow, every conflict between Sarah and me always seemed to be tipped in his favor. How he'd casually drop comments to me, suggesting Sarah was upset with me, or how he'd make it seem like I was the one starting trouble. I never really thought much of it at first. Who would? He was so good at being the perfect one, so convincing in his lies. But over time I started to see through it. The breaking point came one evening when I overheard Sarah and Matt talking in the living room. They didn't realize I was eavesdropping, but what I heard made my stomach drop. "Don't you think Kate is a little too wild? She's always pushing the boundaries, isn't she?" Matt said, his voice dripping with casual concern. "I don't know, Matt," Sarah replied quietly. "It just feels like she's trying to stir up trouble all the time. She's been acting weird lately." No, Sarah," Matt countered. "It's just that Kate doesn't know how to handle her emotions. She's always trying to make you feel bad. And I don't think you should let her get away with it. You deserve better than that." I remember standing there, feeling sick to my stomach, realizing that Matt was planting seeds of doubt in Sarah's mind. It was like he had been doing this for years, subtly manipulating us, feeding us half-truths, making us suspicious of each other. I had suspected it for a while, but hearing it out loud confirmed everything. The tensions between Sarah and me weren't just random sibling fights. They were manufactured. Matt had been playing both of us against each other for as long as I could remember. But I needed proof. I couldn't just confront him without something concrete. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I decided to do something I'd never thought I'd have to do. I needed to find the truth. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Matt had been pulling the strings for years, but I needed proof. Something solid that would show me, once and for all, how deep his manipulation went. I wasn't about to confront him with accusations unless I had something to back it up. So that night, while the house was quiet and everyone else was asleep, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I knew Sarah had a journal. She'd always kept one tucked away in her room, hidden beneath a pile of books or under the bed. It wasn't just a diary. It was a collection of thoughts, memories, and little bits of her life that she rarely shared with anyone. And that's where I thought I'd find the evidence. I didn't want to go through her things without her permission, but at that moment I felt like I had no choice. I crept out of my room, my heart pounding in my chest. The house was still, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards as I moved. I tiptoed down the hallway, past our parents' bedroom and toward Sarah's. Her door was cracked open just a little, as it usually was when she slept. I paused outside, taking a deep breath before pushing it open quietly. There she was, sprawled across her bed, asleep. Her room was dimly lit by the faint glow of the nightlight by the window. My eyes scanned the space, quickly landing on the chest at the foot of her bed. I knew exactly where her journal was. I'd seen her hide it there before, a place no one would think to look. My hand shook as I knelt down, lifting the chest's heavy lid. Inside there were family photos, some old trinkets, and yes, there it was, Sarah's journal along with a few faded letters. I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting as I carefully flipped through the pages, trying not to disturb the contents too much. My mind raced. What was I even looking for? Then I found it. It was a letter, yellowed with age, clearly from our high school days. I recognized the handwriting immediately, Matt's neat, controlled script. As I read the words, my blood ran cold. The letter was addressed to Sarah, but it wasn't just a simple note. It was a letter from Matt, describing a conversation he claimed to have had with me. According to him, I had been spreading vicious rumors about Sarah, telling him that she was a troublemaker, someone who couldn't be trusted. He even went as far as warning her to stay away from me. The shock of it hit me like a punch to the gut. All these years Matt had been telling Sarah that I was the problem, that I was the one trying to sabotage our relationship. And Sarah, believing him, had slowly started pulling away from me. That was why we always fought. That was why there was always this invisible barrier between us. My hands trembled as I read the letter again, piecing everything together in my mind. Matt had been orchestrating this division between Sarah and me, feeding her lies, manipulating us both into thinking the other was the enemy. I was the scapegoat. I had no idea how long I sat there, staring at the letter, my mind reeling. But I couldn't waste any more time. I had the proof. I had to show Sarah. But as I was about to close the chest and slip out of her room, I heard it, a rustle of sheets. My heart stopped and I froze. I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat. There, standing in the doorway, was Sarah. Her eyes were wide with confusion and fury, and she was staring straight at me. "What the hell are you doing in here?" she demanded, her voice harsh and urgent, though she tried to keep it quiet to avoid waking our parents. I stood up quickly, clutching the journal in my hands. I don't know how to explain this, but... Sarah's expression twisted in anger, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Get out of my room, Kate. Now." I tried to say something, anything, to explain, to tell her about the letter, about Matt's lies, but she wouldn't listen. She was already moving toward me, pushing me toward the door with more force than I expected. "Stay out of my room," she spat, slamming the door behind me before I could get another word in. My chest felt tight as I stood there in the hallway, unsure of what to do next. I had just uncovered the truth, and now Sarah was angry with me for snooping through her things. But how could I not show her the letter? I knew she wouldn't believe me without it. The next morning, Sarah confronted Matt. She had to. There was no way around it now. She had seen me in her room, and though she hadn't fully understood why, she must have been starting to connect the dots. But Matt, ever the actor, played his part flawlessly. When she asked him about it, he pretended to be shocked, confused. He looked genuinely concerned, like he had no idea why I'd been in her room. "You shouldn't have gone through her things like that, Sarah," he said, his tone just the right mix of sympathy and disbelief. "She's just looking for something to make you doubt me, but you can't let her do that. You know how she is. She's always been a little unstable." It worked. Sarah believed him. She believed that I was the problem, that I had somehow betrayed her again. And that was when things spiraled out of control. Later that afternoon, Sarah stormed into my room, her face a mask of fury. In her hands were the remnants of her journal, the pages torn apart, burned, or shredded beyond recognition. "What did you do?" she screamed, her voice raw with anger. "Why would you destroy my things? Why would you do this to me?" I stood there, stunned. I had no idea what she was talking about. "Sarah, I didn't." "Liar," she interrupted, throwing the charred pieces of paper at me. "It's Matt. He's been manipulating you, hasn't he? You've been lying about me this whole time." I tried to calm her down, but it was no use. She wouldn't listen. "You don't understand," I pleaded. "It's not me, Sarah. It's Matt. He's been doing this to both of us for years." But she wouldn't hear it. Tears streamed down her face as she screamed, "I never want to speak to you again, Kate." And with that, she turned and left, slamming the door behind her. I was left standing there, broken, with no way to reach her. I thought I had lost her forever. The next day was a blur. I could barely think straight, the weight of everything crashing down on me. Matt had been manipulating us for years, but now Sarah thought I was the one lying to her. I didn't know how to fix it, or even if I could. She wasn't listening. and the anger in her eyes when she left my room still haunted me. But as much as I wanted to give up, something inside me refused to let go. I had proof. I had the letter, and it wasn't just some random accusation. It was Matt's words written in black and white, proving that he had been the one pulling the strings all along. I couldn't let it end this way. I needed Sarah to see the truth no matter what it took. The hardest part was knowing that even if I could somehow convince Sarah, the damage had already been done. I didn't know how long it would take to rebuild our relationship, if ever. But I had to try. That afternoon, I went to find our parents. They were sitting together in the living room talking quietly. I could hear the frustration in their voices even before I walked in. They had no idea what was going on between Sarah and me, but I could tell they could sense the tension. It was palpable, thick in the air. I couldn't hold back anymore. I needed them to understand what had been happening in our family, and I needed them to believe me. So I sat down with them and explained everything. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something." I started, my voice shaking with both anger and fear. "You've been blind to what's been going on in this house for years. Matt, he's been manipulating all of us." I could see the confusion on their faces. They looked at each other, exchanging a worried glance. "What are you talking about?" my dad asked, his tone cautious but stern. "It's true," I continued, pushing through the panic that was rising in my chest. "Matt has been playing us against each other. He's been lying to Sarah about me, making her think I've been spreading rumors, making us all think the worst of each other. Everything that's happened between Sarah and me, all the fights, all the misunderstandings, it's been Matt's doing." I paused, waiting for them to process what I was saying. They were silent, unsure of how to respond. I could feel their skepticism, but I wasn't about to stop now. I had to show them. I pulled out the letter. "Here," I said, holding it out to them. "This is the proof. Matt wrote this to Sarah, claiming I was talking behind her back, making her think I was the problem. He's been doing this for years, planting lies, twisting the truth. He's been playing you both too. You never saw it because you trusted him so much, but you've been blind to what he's really been doing." They took the letter from my hands, and as they read it, their faces went pale. My mom's eyes welled with tears, and my dad's jaw clenched in disbelief. It was hard to tell whether they were angry or devastated, maybe a mix of both. "Is this true, Matt?" my mom finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Matt had been standing in the doorway, silent, looking like the picture of innocence. He took a step forward, his usual calm demeanor in place. I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice filled with fake confusion. "That letter doesn't mean anything. Kate, she's just trying to make me look bad. You know how she is." I wanted to scream. I wanted to slap the smug look off his face, but I held myself together. I knew this moment had to count. "Don't try to spin this, Matt," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and relief. "You've been manipulating all of us for years. And now you're trying to lie your way out of it. You've turned Sarah against me, and I don't know how you managed to do it, but I'm done being your pawn." For a moment there was silence. Matt opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. I could see the cracks in his perfect facade, the way his mask started to slip. He wasn't the confident, charming older brother anymore. He was cornered, caught in his own lies. Finally he spoke, his voice wavering just a little. "I never meant for things to get this out of hand. You don't understand," he said, his eyes darting to our parents for support. "I've always had to be the perfect one. You've always put that pressure on me. I did what I had to do to keep everything together. You don't get it. You've been tearing this family apart for your own gain, Matt," my dad said, his voice low but filled with anger. "We trusted you and you betrayed us. All of us. For years." The weight of the words hung in the air. Matt didn't say anything else. He just stood there, staring at our parents, at me, at the evidence we'd laid out for him. For the first time I saw him break. Our parents were devastated. I could see it in their eyes. They'd always believed Matt was the perfect son, the one who could do no wrong. Now they were faced with the reality that they'd missed the signs for so long, that their golden child wasn't what they thought he was. It was then that I realized something. Even though I had proof, even though I had exposed Matt for what he really was, it didn't magically fix everything. It didn't take away the hurt, the years of manipulation, the broken trust. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't the only one fighting. I had Sarah's support now, at least I hoped I did. My parents demanded an apology from Matt. They told him he needed to seek professional help to understand why he had manipulated us the way he did. And they made it clear that until he made some real changes, he wouldn't be part of our lives anymore. That was when it hit me. The family I had known, the one I had grown up with, was no more. The perfect image we'd always had, the one we were so proud of, had been shattered. And in its place, there was only a painful truth. Matt had destroyed everything for his own selfish reasons. But now it was up to us to rebuild. I didn't know how long it would take or if things would ever truly heal. But Sarah and I had each other, and that was a start. In the days following our family confrontation, I couldn't help but feel like I was living in a fog. The truth was out, but the fallout was so much bigger than I'd anticipated. Sarah and we had to come to terms with the fact that our entire relationship had been built on lies. Lies from the one person we thought we could trust the most. I remember the nights when I'd lie in bed, staring up at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind would race with everything that had happened: Matt's betrayal, Sarah's anger, our parents' devastation. It felt like everything was falling apart. And yet somehow I also felt a strange sense of relief. At least the truth was out there now. We had proof, and for the first time the weight of the lie was no longer on my shoulders. But the relief was fleeting. The cracks in our family weren't going to magically disappear. There was so much hurt to heal, and I wasn't sure where to begin. For Sarah and me, the hardest part wasn't just dealing with Matt's manipulation. It was the years we'd lost, the bond we could have had, the friendship we could have shared if it hadn't been for him driving a wedge between us. We hadn't been close in years, but now that we knew the truth, it was almost as if we didn't know how to be around each other anymore. The past was messy, complicated, and it felt like we were strangers trying to rebuild something that had been broken for too long. But we were determined. We had to try. One night, after our parents had gone to bed, Sarah and I sat together in the living room, the dim light of the lamp casting long shadows across the floor. We didn't talk much at first. Neither of us knew where to start. The silence between us was heavy, full of things we still needed to say but couldn't. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it before. "I don't know how to feel about any of this, Kate," she admitted, staring at her hands. "Part of me wants to hate you for what happened, for going through my stuff and bringing all this up. But the other part of me knows you were just trying to help. It's a lot." "I get it," I said softly, my heart aching. "I really do. I never meant to hurt you, Sarah. I didn't know how else to get you to see the truth." She didn't respond right away, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. I knew she was torn between the years of anger, the hurt from everything Matt had done to us, and the part of her that still wanted to believe in family. "I've spent so long thinking I had no one," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought you were against me, that you didn't care about me, that you were just, I don't know, trying to make my life harder. But now I don't even know what to believe anymore. Everything's just been one big lie." I reached out and placed my hand on hers, squeezing gently. "We can fix this," I said quietly. "We can start over. It won't be easy, but we can. I'm sorry, Sarah. I am. For everything." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm sorry too. I should have listened to you sooner. I should have trusted you. I didn't know who to trust anymore." We sat there for a while, letting the silence fill the space between us. There was a lot to unpack, a lot of hurt to heal, but for the first time in years, I felt like we were starting to find our way back to each other. The next few weeks were a blur. Our parents, still reeling from the truth about Matt, decided to get counseling. They realized just how much they had missed, how blind they'd been to Matt's manipulation. It wasn't just about Sarah and me anymore. It was about the entire family. It was about understanding how they had allowed themselves to be deceived for so long, how they'd failed to see the signs that something was wrong. They started attending therapy together, and it helped in a way. They were trying to process the guilt, the anger, the confusion. And as much as I wanted to hate them for not seeing Matt for what he was, I knew they had been victims too. It was hard though. How do you forgive the people who failed to protect you from the person who hurt you the most? I didn't have the answer yet, but I was trying. As for Matt, he seemed to disappear into the background. After the confrontation, he left for a while, saying he needed space to think. We all knew what that meant. He was sulking. He wasn't one to admit when he was wrong, and he certainly wasn't about to face the fallout of his actions head-on. I wasn't sure what he was doing during that time, but I wasn't interested. He had already done enough damage. It was up to him now to figure out how to fix things if he even cared to. But even as Matt kept his distance, something started to change between Sarah and me. Slowly over time we began to rebuild the bridge that had once stood so strong between us. We didn't talk about the past much, at least not at first. There was too much pain, too many years of hurt to unpack in one sitting. Instead, we took small steps, watching movies together, going for walks, talking about the present. Felt like starting from scratch, but that was okay. We needed time to heal. One evening, not long after everything had come to light, Sarah and I were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset behind the trees. It was one of those moments of quiet reflection, the kind that makes you realize how far you've come, even when you're not looking. "I'm still mad at him," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "I'm mad at Matt. I'm mad at myself for not seeing it sooner. But I don't want to stay angry. I don't want to let him ruin us anymore." "I feel the same way," I said, looking at her. "We can't keep letting him control our lives. We're stronger than that." She nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I think we can be okay. We just need time." "Yeah," I said, my heart swelling. "We'll be okay."